The character we're going to introduce is a young woman named Elena, who is a journalist from a small town in Siberia. She's known for her sharp instincts and her uncanny ability to uncover the truth. Her curiosity often leads her to the most unexpected places. Elena huddled against the icy wind that whipped through the narrow streets of her hometown this hay. The biting chill of the Siberian winter was a constant companion, one she had learned to ignore over the years. She walked with purpose, her boots crunching rhythmically on the freshly fallen snow. The town was quiet, almost eerie in its stillness, as if the cold had muffled the very essence of life itself. The only sounds that pierced the silence were the distant howls of wolves, a reminder of the wild world that lay just beyond the town's borders. Elena pushed open the door to the local cafe, the warmth of the room enveloping her like a welcoming embrace. The scent of freshly brewed tea and baked pierogi filled the air, offering a comforting reprieve from the harshness outside. The owner, a burly man named Sergei, looked up from behind the counter and offered a gruff nod of acknowledgement. She returned the gesture with a curt smile, her eyes scanning the room for the person she had come to meet. Her gaze fell upon an old woman, wrapped in a shawl that had seen better days. Sitting in the corner, her eyes were a piercing blue, the color of a glacier, and her face was etched with lines that spoke of a life lived in the unforgiving embrace of the tundra. This was Valentina, the woman who had called Elena here with the promise of a story that would make her career. As Elena approached, Valentina looked up, her eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Thank you for coming," Valentina said, her voice quivering with the cold. "Or perhaps something else." She spoke in a hushed tone that seemed out of place in the almost empty cafe. "I have something to tell you. Something I've kept hidden for too long." Elena leaned in, her journalist's instincts peaked. "What is it?" she asked, her voice low and steady. Valentina took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the room as if ensuring they weren't being watched. "It's about the pass," she whispered. "The Dyatlov Pass." The mention of the infamous location sent a shiver down Elena's spine. The Dyatlov Pass was a name that had haunted the region for decades, synonymous with a mystery that had remained unsolved since 1959. It was where a group of 9 hikers had met with a brutal and inexplicable end, their bodies discovered under bizarre circumstances that had confounded authorities and captivated the public's imagination. Elena felt the weight of the words settle on her shoulders. "What do you know about it?" she asked, her voice heavy with anticipation. Valentina's eyes grew wide, and she leaned in even closer. "My husband," she began, her voice trembling, "he was one of the first responders. He saw things that were never reported." The journalist in Elena took over, and she reached for her notepad and pen, ready to record the long-buried secrets that Valentina was about to reveal. The old woman's story would not only challenge everything Elena knew about the incident, but would also lead her on a journey that would test her courage and resolve. "He never talked about it," Valentina continued, her voice barely audible over the crackling of the fireplace. "But the night before he passed, he told me what he saw. The hiker's tent was ripped open from the inside out, as if something terrifying had forced them to flee into the night without proper gear." Elena's heart raced as she scribbled down every word. This was the kind of lead that could rewrite history, or at least shed new light on the events that had taken place over 50 years ago. "What else did he tell you?" she asked, her voice tinged with both urgency and fear. Valentina paused, her gaze drifting to the flickering flames. "Their bodies," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "were found scattered across the mountain. Some with injuries that no animal or human could inflict. And their clothes," she shuddered, "their clothes were torn to shreds." As if by something unseen, Elena felt a mix of horror and fascination. The official reports had mentioned strange conditions, but the details Valentina shared were far more grisly than anything she had read. "What do you think happened to them?" she prodded gently. The old woman leaned back, her eyes filled with a haunted look that spoke of a truth too painful to fully articulate. I think, she said slowly, that they encountered something that night. That no one was meant to see. The room grew colder. The warmth of the fireplace seemingly incapable of reaching the corner where they sat. Elena's mind raced with questions, each more pressing than the last. Yet, she knew better than to push too hard. Instead, she nodded solemnly, her eyes never leaving Valentina's. Thank you for sharing this with me, Elena said, her voice soft. I promise I'll do everything I can to uncover the truth. Valentina nodded, a sad smile playing on her lips. I know you will, she replied. Their spirits are restless, waiting for answers. Maybe now, with your help, they'll finally find some peace. With a heavy heart, Elena left the cafe, her thoughts swirling like the snow outside. The Dyatlov Pass was calling to her, its siren song of mystery and tragedy growing louder with every step she took. Little did she know that her pursuit of the truth would lead her into a world where the lines between reality and legend blurred, and where the very fabric of nature itself seemed to hold dark and ancient secrets. The next morning, Elena set out on her journey, armed with nothing but her determination and the chilling words of Valentina's account. The pass loomed in the distance, a silent sentinel of the unknown, its icy peaks gleaming in the pale winter sun. As she approached, the howling of the wolves grew more insistent, as if they too were eager for the story to be told. Her first stop was the local archives, a cramped and dusty room filled with yellowed documents and the scent of history. The archivist, a stoic man named Ivan, eyed her with suspicion. But when she mentioned Valentina's name, his expression softened. He led her to a corner where a thick, dusty binder lay, almost forgotten. It contained the original case files of the Dyatlov Pass incident. Elena pored over the documents, her eyes widening with every page she turned. The photographs were particularly disturbing. The hiker's tent, shredded as if by an invisible hand, the bodies, frozen in contorted poses of terror, the trees surrounding the campsite, stripped of bark and bent at impossible angles. There were reports of strange lights in the sky, of inexplicable radio interference, and of the hikers' final, panicked entries in their diaries. The more she read, the more Elena felt the weight of the unanswered questions pressing down on her. Who, or what, had caused such unspeakable horror? And why had the authorities been so eager to bury the truth? Her investigations led her to the local indigenous community, the Mansi people, who spoke in hushed tones of a vengeful spirit that dwelt in the mountains. They warned her not to go, that the pass was cursed, and that those who sought answers there often found only death. But Elena was not one to be deterred by superstition. Undeterred, she ventured further into the wilderness, her path illuminated only by the ghostly glow of her flashlight. The trees grew denser, the air colder, and the silence more profound. It was as if the very land itself was holding its breath, waiting for her to uncover its secrets. As she reached the spot where the hikers had made their final camp, she felt a palpable sense of dread. The area was desolate, untouched by time, as if the world had frozen in the moment of their terror. The tent was long gone, but the imprint of its grisly end remained in the snow. Elena stood in the center of the clearing, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her heart racing in her chest. This was where it had all begun, and she knew that she was now part of the story. The whispers of the wind grew louder, carrying with them the echoes of screams long silenced. And then, she heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible sound, like the rustling of fabric against the snow. She spun around, her eyes searching the darkness. But there was nothing there. Or so she thought. As she turned back to her tent, she caught a glimpse of something in the corner of her eye. A shadow, fleeting and indistinct, that seemed to be watching her from the edge of the clearing. She swung her flashlight in that direction. But it was gone. Swallowed by the night. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut: she was not alone. The spirit of the past had found her. And it had no intention of letting her leave without a fight. Elena's hand trembled as she zipped up her tent. The cold metal feeling like a lifeline in the icy grip of the unknown. She lay down, her heart thumping against her ribcage, and listened to the symphony of the wilderness. The wind whispered secrets. The trees groaned with the weight of the snow. And somewhere in the distance, the wolves continued their mournful song. Her mind raced with the possibilities of what had made the sound. Was it a bear, drawn by the scent of her supplies? Or something more sinister, a manifestation of the curse the Monsi had warned her about? She tried to convince herself it was just the wind playing tricks on her, but the feeling of being watched lingered. The night grew long, and Elena's thoughts grew darker. The whispers grew louder, morphing into a cacophony of voices that seemed to be speaking in a language she almost understood. It was the hikers, she realized with a start, their final moments replaying in the fabric of the night. The fear was palpable, the panic suffocating. With the first light of dawn, she emerged from her tent, the cold a stark contrast to the feverish heat of her dreams. The clearing was untouched, save for her own footprints, but she could feel the presence of the spirits that lingered. Elena knew she had to press on. The truth was out there, somewhere in the frozen wasteland, waiting for her. With renewed determination, she packed up her gear and set out, her eyes peeled for any sign of what had happened here. The climb was arduous, the mountain seemingly fighting back with every step she took. The wind howled, the snow stung her cheeks, and her legs burned with exhaustion. Yet she pushed on, driven by a force that was equal parts obsession and obligation. As she neared the spot where the hikers had been found, she stumbled upon something that made her blood run cold, a piece of fabric. Tattered and stained. Caught on a branch. It was the same color as the shreds she had seen in the archives. A grim reminder of the fate that had befallen them. The trees grew closer together. The path more treacherous. As if the mountain itself was trying to conceal its secrets. And then, she saw it, a clearing. Just like the one Valentina had described. Surrounded by a ring of trees that stood like sentinels. Their branches twisted and bare, her heart in her throat. Elena stepped into the clearing. The fabric of reality seemed to stretch and warp around her. The whispers of the wind growing into a deafening roar. The spirits of the hikers were here. Their anguish echoing through the years. Desperate for their story to be told. The air grew thick with anticipation. And the fabric of the world grew taut. Elena reached into her pocket. And pulled out a small digital recorder. Her hand steady despite the tremor in her voice. "I'm here," she called out to the ghosts of the past. "I'm here to listen." And with that, she began to record the most chilling interview of her life. One that would change everything she thought she knew about the Dyatlov Pass. And the mysteries that lay buried beneath its icy embrace. The spirits spoke through the wind. Their voices a cacophony of pain and fear. Elena listened, transcribing their final moments with a trembling hand. She could feel the panic. The desperation. As the hikers had faced whatever malevolent force had pursued them through the night. As the last echoes of their cries faded into the cold. She knew she had her story. But the price of that knowledge was a chilling realization: she had become part of the legend. A piece of the very mystery she sought to unravel. With the sun setting, Elena made her way back to civilization. The haunting whispers of the mountain at her back. The town of Vizhay looked different now. Its quiet streets holding a new kind of menace in the shadow of what she had uncovered. But she couldn't stop there. The story had only just begun. And she was the only one who could tell it, with the evidence in hand. And the voices of the dead guiding her. She would bring the truth to light. No matter the cost. The following days were a blur of writing and research. The town's whispers of her findings, growing into a crescendo of excitement and fear. Her article, when it was finally published, sent shockwaves through the community and beyond, reopening old wounds and sparking new debates about the nature of the tragedy. Elena found herself at the center of a storm she had never anticipated. Her name whispered in awe and dread. Yet, she remained steadfast, driven by the ghosts of the hikers who had entrusted her with their story. As the months passed, she continued her investigations, delving deeper into the archives, interviewing those who had known the hikers, and piecing together the puzzle of their final hours. The more she discovered, the more questions arose, each more unsettling than the last. The government took notice, and soon enough, she found herself being followed. Her phone tapped, her movements monitored. But Elena was not one to be silenced. She knew that the truth was out there, waiting to be found, and she would not rest until it was brought to the world. The Dyatlov Pass had claimed its latest victim, but it had also given her a purpose. And as the winter snows melted into spring, she knew that she would return to the mountain, to face whatever secrets it held, and to ensure that the spirits of the 9 hikers would finally find the peace they so desperately craved. The story of the Dyatlov Pass was no longer just a tale of the past. It was a living, breathing part of Elena's present, one that she could not escape, no matter how much she wished she could. It had become her obsession, her burden, and her destiny. The whispers grew stronger, the shadows longer, and the stakes higher with every step she took. Yet she continued, driven by the unshakable belief that the truth would set them all free. And so, the cycle of the journalist and the mountain continued, bound together by the chilling embrace of the unknown. The story was far from over, its final chapter waiting to be written in the cold, unforgiving heart of Siberia.